Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome to the Legal Lounge. Pam, we are so excited to have you with us today. I know we have known each other for a number of years, and you've been such an instrumental resource for individuals going through divorce when it comes to their mortgage. But can you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself?
So my name is Pam Abirached. I'm a mortgage lender in the North Carolina area. So I am a regular mortgage lender. I can help anybody buy a house, but I have this special designation. I'm a certified divorce lending professional, so I can help anybody who's looking to buy their house, but specifically when you are going through a divorce, I can help you at a much deeper level than a regular mortgage lender can.
Nice. Okay, that's so interesting because I know a lot of people, when they even start talking about divorce or separation or ending a marital relationship, they don't realize that there are actual designations in industries such as the mortgage industry for a divorce professional. So, what makes you, I guess, different aside from having the CDLP letters behind your name?
Good question. So I always say, and I hate saying this, but it's unfortunately the truth. I always say mortgage lenders are like used car salesmen.
Okay.
They're kind of a dime a dozen, and there's a lot to know in the mortgage world. And so there are some people who just get into mortgages and don't really know anything, and sometimes they can get by doing that. But there's actually a statistic that 65% of all mortgage experiences are bad, which is like alarming. That this is your biggest investment of your life for most of Americans, and you're having a bad experience doing it. So I strive to make sure that we're in that 35% of good experiences. So that means that I am super knowledgeable about mortgage guidelines in general. I am not somebody who's trying to help every single person that comes my way. I am selective about who I work with because I want us to be in a good relationship, and you're not getting schlepped around to a million different people and having to call an 800 number. Like, you get me directly. And that's important whether you're just getting a mortgage or doing something with your mortgage when you're going through a divorce, because there's a lot that goes into buying a home and obtaining financing and getting through underwriting. So whether you're just buying a house or refinancing, or there is a marital home and you're going through a divorce, who you use makes a huge difference, because I have the abundance of knowledge that's necessary to make sure you have a good experience. And if you are going through a divorce, I can navigate the landmines that can come up while you're trying to get through underwriting.
Sure. So I'm glad you mentioned underwriting because I personally, for my very first home, had a horrible experience. Long story short, I ended up losing the first home I ever wanted to buy because the mortgage broker and the process, let's just say, did not turn out in my favor. So I cannot relate more to you when you say, yeah, there's a lot of car salesmen out there, and then there are the people who actually know the process, the mortgage process.
Yeah, it's super important, especially here in North Carolina. I mean, we've got due diligence, which is super weird for a lot of other people in the country, but you can lose money if your mortgage lender doesn't do a good job for you, which I'm sure you
Actually,
experienced.
I experienced that. I did experience that. And even though it wasn't like a lot of money, like we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars, even a couple $100 was very frustrating to lose.
especially because I was right out of law school and didn't have much in my bank account to begin with.
Yeah, I totally hear you. That's like my biggest thing. I do not want somebody to go under contract if they are not for sure getting that loan, because to me, I mean, no, it's not all my fault, but truly, if I get somebody under contract and they don't qualify, I put it on myself.
Sure, sure. So can you explain to the listener like what you mean by quote unquote due diligence? I think that's a
Yes.
great question.
Yeah, I think there's maybe only one or two other states in the country that have this. So in North Carolina, we have a due diligence period and a due diligence fee, where when you put in an offer on a house, you're actually telling the seller, okay, I'm going to offer you X amount for your home, but you're also paying earnest money deposit, which most people know what that is. It's kind of a preliminary deposit or down payment on the home. And then the due diligence is money that I always tell your buyer or my buyers, just say goodbye to that money. So you are basically paying the seller to take their home off of the market. A lot of out of state people don't like this. They think it's really dumb. But in North Carolina, you can back out of the sale literally the day of closing as the buyer. The seller doesn't have that option. So you're paying the sellers to take the home off the market to show that you've got some skin in the game. And if there's like a bad, how do I say this, a material misrepresentation on the home that the seller gave, if they gave bad information on the house or something really is wrong, you may be able to get your due diligence back. But I usually tell people just plan on not getting it back unless you get to closing, then it's credited to you. But basically, you're paying the house seller to take their house off the market so that you can start doing your inspections and appraisal and actually buy the house.
That's so interesting. And so that's a requirement in the contract process of purchasing a house here in North Carolina.
Yes. Now you don't have to pay it. I mean, if you negotiate that with the seller, but I've seen that like twice in my 10 years of doing this. So
Yeah, yeah. And to your point, the seller does also have some interest in making sure that the buyer is serious.
yes, exactly.
And how is that due diligence amount determined?
Before COVID, I think there was like a 1% or 0.5% like rule of thumb. During COVID, people were literally putting 10, 50, $75,000 in due diligence. And again, that is money that you do not get back if you cancel your contract. So it was crazy time.
Wow.
But you usually, I mean, now it's a lot more calm. COVID was obviously a different time, but
Yeah.
usually I'll see like 500 to 1,000. I mean, sometimes it's more, but right now with the market being where it is, it's pretty low.
There's no conversation more romantic than discussing a prenup with your partner, right? Okay, maybe the song for your first dance does a bit more in the romance department. Speaking of emotions, though, the prenup is a very legal document that everyone has a very emotional reaction to. Many people avoid the prenup conversation because they feel it is an indication that the marriage will fail. But here's the truth: half of all marriages already fail, regardless of whether the spouses had the prenup conversation or not. If you or someone you care about is getting married, would knowing what marriage involves legally be important? What about having the difficult conversations surrounding finances, career aspirations, and pursuing parenthood prior to the wedding date? If you are looking to build a solid foundation for your marriage, or you want the same for someone you care about, we are here to help you learn more about prenups from a position of knowledge, not emotion. To learn more about family law from a legal professional, book a consultation with a member of the Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal services at modernlegalnc.com.
So especially with consideration of the due diligence, and I'm sure buyers don't want to lose a house that they've fallen in love with before they close. What are some considerations if a buyer has recently gotten out of a marriage that are considerations for them versus, say, your average home buyer?
A big thing that comes up is obviously the marital home. We'll start with that. If you are wanting to keep your marital home versus if you're wanting to sell your marital home, or maybe one person is staying in the home and one person is departing, these are all the scenarios that could come up. So if you're somebody who's wanting to stay in the marital home and your spouse will be departing, chances are you have to refinance that spouse off or do a loan assumption where you basically take over the existing mortgage and the departing spouse's name is removed. So those are kind of the options if you want to stay in the home. If you are the one leaving the home, you want to make sure your name is not on that mortgage anymore if it's on there currently. So, you need to make sure that your ex-spouse refinances you off or assumes the mortgage. And on top of that, if you are wanting to buy something in the future, the existing mortgage could become a factor in your current ability to purchase. We also look at alimony or child support and see what that looks like. So these are the big things that come up when you're going through a divorce, depending on if you're staying in the home, if you're leaving the home, if the home is still going to be in your name when you try to buy something. But those are the most common hurdles to get around.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I love how you're like, you're going to want this to happen. And I'm sitting here as a family law attorney saying, well, it doesn't always happen that
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
I mean, I have had the case where a case went through the full litigation process, meaning the parties weren't able to pretty much agree to anything.
Oh no.
And so a judge did, and the judge actually found that the supporting spouse had to cover the mortgage at least during the post separation support phase, which is before everything is finalized, and then did distribute the house and the mortgage to the responsibility of the dependent spouse, meaning the person effectively who was not working or earning income.
Mhm.
But the judge did not order that she had to refinance the mortgage. And part of the reason is because she would never be able to qualify.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, at the end of the day, my client is stuck on this mortgage that technically, through the family courts, he's not legally responsible to pay, but his name is on the mortgage
Yes.
until it's paid off.
And that's where an assumption could possibly happen, but usually they're going to make sure that you can pay the loan.
Mhm.
And I mean, if she's getting alimony or child support, she could potentially qualify. But there is a thing called a contingent liability where if the home in this situation, the home was awarded to the wife, right?
Yes. Yep. All right. Yep. You got it.
So the home is awarded to the wife. And then basically, if you can show proof that the wife is the one making that mortgage payment, if her name is on the mortgage and we can show that she has paid it for 12 months, we can basically exclude the mortgage payment from his name. But also, when it's assigned by the court, we can also usually exclude that too if we can show proof that the court has assigned it. So either if court assigned debt has been sent to somebody and it's a joint account, or if it's a joint account and we can prove a 12-month payment history, and that's for divorce or not, we can exclude those payments. But yeah, it's still, either way, it sucks that his name is on there.
Yeah. It's still annoying. I mean,
Yeah.
luckily, I mean, it's my understanding that the house should be paid off shortly. But
Oh, good.
imagine if it was a similar circumstance for someone who is on year 3 of a 30-year mortgage.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that can get very annoying very quickly.
Hmm. Yeah. And a lot of times right now, people in the last few years have gotten into a 2 or 3 point something percent interest rate. And now they're going through a divorce and they have to refinance and rates are in the sevens. So that has been a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, going from a super low mortgage payment and now they have to refinance their spouse off and get into a higher interest rate. And most of the time, they also owe their spouse some equity from the home too. So they're getting a bigger mortgage balance and a higher interest rate, which is really not a lot of fun for most people.
Yeah, and not to add to that stress, if they're looking to purchase yet another home,
Hmm.
it's the market, at least here in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's kind of rough out there.
Yeah, it really is. So, yeah, not to be doom and gloom, but it's definitely been a hard time for people going through divorces who already have a home, or even if they're selling their home and both are buying a new property at some point. It still is like,
Mhm.
oh, going from those low interest rates and being forced into buying something that's more expensive because of appreciation and a higher interest rate. It's definitely been a challenge on top of all of the challenges that come with a divorce.
Yeah, agreed. So, what are some things that you find come up relatively often when you're helping someone who, say, is has already gone through the divorce process, but their legal order or their separation agreement or their property settlement doesn't have certain language that you're looking for? Like, what would you want the lawyer to know to make sure your job was easier? Is effectively what I'm asking.
This is a double-edged sword because I see the need for it, but I also don't love it on my end, is when there is a date that somebody has to refinance by. The reason being, either the person who has to refinance hasn't had their alimony or child support for long enough, so they can't qualify by the particular date in the agreement, or it's there's something else standing in the way, or if there's like this sudden time pressure because they waited too long, or maybe they had a job change or something like that. So I see and understand the need for that for the other spouse. The biggest part is child support or alimony, because a lot of times I'll see that 6 months after this date you have to refinance your ex spouse off of the home, but at that point, they hadn't received their child support or alimony for long enough. And while I'm talking about that, the rule is you have to have 6 months proof of on time, paid in full child support or alimony. So if it's only been 4 months that you've been receiving your child support or alimony, then I still have to wait 2 more months before you can even qualify to get a mortgage. And the reason for that is to make sure that you are receiving your payments on time and in
Mhm.
full, because we all know that sometimes that doesn't happen. So that's the big thorn in my side.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. And maybe that's a word to the legal community of, hey, our mortgage brokers need more time at the very least. Because from the legal perspective, it really is making sure that we have an enforceable order. Because if it just
Mhm.
says, one person has to refinance by a certain, without a date, I should say,
Mhm.
just has to refinance, and there's no date, theoretically, that could be 20 years from now.
Right.
And so if you're telling me, hey, we need at least 6 months history, but I like the on time payment, but they haven't been receiving alimony or child support on time or even monthly, that
Mhm.
creates a whole nother hurdle to overcome.
Yeah. And the other thing that comes up somewhat often is the husband is going to pay the wife $5,000 a month, for example, and the mortgage is $2,500. So I've seen it before where it's like, okay, the husband owes $5,000. He's going to pay $2,500 a month for the mortgage and the $500 car payment, and then he'll give the wife $2,000, to cover everything. And that is not good. Like,
Yeah.
I've made that work before, but it's a knockdown drag out fight with underwriting, and it just causes problems. So if you are like making these weird agreements, just have the husband pay the wife the $5,000. She will make the mortgage payment, she will make her car payment, and let it be, because we have to track down 12 months, or sorry, 6 months proof that the husband has paid the car, and 6 months proof that the husband has paid the mortgage, and 6 months proof he's paid his remainder. It's like, it's
Yeah.
so much. The underwriters hate it. So don't overcomplicate it. Keep it simple, stupid. I love that saying. I hate to say it, but keep it simple.
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. And sometimes I'll like my clients will want what you're fighting against,
Yeah.
especially if they're the dependent spouse, or in the example we've been using is the wife, because
Hmm.
fortunately that is what happens more often than not. And the dependent spouse is like, okay, well, yay, I'll definitely get XYZ paid off, but then it can't be counted, or to your point, it'll be really hard for said monies to be counted as, quote unquote income
Yeah.
to the dependent spouse for any purpose, not
Hmm.
only refinancing or qualifying for a mortgage, but maybe even getting a car loan or a personal loan or any other type of financial support that does base a lot on credit and money coming in.
And it shows that if you are the dependent spouse and you haven't been responsible for making payments on stuff because your spouse handled all of that, if you are receiving that lump sum of money, it's giving you a chance to get used to making your own payments, even if everything is still in a joint name. You make your car payment, you make your mortgage payment, and show the creditor, be it the mortgage company or the car financing, that you can make these payments, that you're able to be responsible with it, because that's a huge thing for us,
Mhm.
especially.
Teaching the dependent spouse to be financially independent.
Yes, and showing that they can be. I mean,
Mhm.
whether divorcing or not, a big thing that we look at is your ability to make your payments on time. That's why credit scores are so important. And we also do verifications of rent. If you're not willing to pay your housing payments on time, then that is a hugely weighted piece of your mortgage approval. So if you're not making your rent payments on time, they're going to assume you're not going to make your mortgage payments on time too.
Yeah, that's interesting because I actually remember reading a Facebook post. Yes, I see them every once in a while about how sometimes a person is stuck in a rental arrangement and it's very hard for them to get out of the rental arrangement. Well, first and foremost, because the rents are so high, it makes
Hmm.
it harder to save money. Also, then the mortgage company taking a look at it. How do people, at least from your perspective, who have gotten out of a separation or divorce, let's say they did move out of the marital home, rented a place for 6 months to a year, and now they're ready to purchase the house. What are some things that are going through their mind?
On like the rental payment history.
Yeah, on the rental payment history and to qualify for the new
Mhm.
home that they're going to start their new chapter in.
Like you said, rents are really high right now, and it makes it hard to save money up if you
Mhm.
are, maxing out what you can spend on your monthly rent. I mean, it's hard not to because it's just so expensive. So saving up for a down payment if you don't already have it is difficult. As far as the rental payment history, if you are making your payments on time or mostly on time, if you skip a whole month, that's where it's bad. But if your rent is due on the 15th and you paid it on the 16th, it's fine. The problem is when you don't make a payment or you're, habitually late by more than, a couple days. That's where the problem comes in. An eviction is also not a good situation to see. But generally speaking, even if you're maxing things out, if you can come up with a down payment somehow, and if you can keep your payments made on time, those are the kind of things that we like to see.
So here's another curveball, just because I have you here and I can ask you all the questions I want. If a couple separates and let's say all the law stuff is done
Hmm.
and the one person that's coming to you for a mortgage, there's no spousal support or child support, but let's say there's a distributive award as a result of the property division. So
Hmm.
let's say this distributive award is, for example, a total sum of $100,000, but it's paid over, say, 4 years, thousand per year.
Hmm.
Can that be factored in, or how does that work?
Are you saying like 100,000 lump sum each year, or would it be monthly?
Well, it's 100,000 lump sum to be paid in increments of 25,000 per year.
Depending on how it's set up, we should potentially be able to use that. Another trick we used to use a lot was setting up a trust, but the guidelines around that have recently changed. So now you usually have to show that you have received 12 months of payments from that trust before we can use that as reliable income. For any income, you have to be likely to continue receiving it for 3 years. So for general employment, unless you have like a contract date that ends, next year or something like that, we just make the assumption that your employment is likely to continue. But when you have a 17-year-old and you're getting child support for that 17-year-old, unless there's some special thing written into your agreements, it's going to end in a year. So you're not going to have that 3-year continuation on your child support. Same thing with alimony. If you don't have, a forever alimony or 10 years from now, if your alimony is ending in a year or two, we can't use that as income, even if you have your 6-month history that I was talking about. So to answer your question, if it's set up properly, we should be able to use that and show that there is a 3-year continuation. But it depends on how it's set up, or if it was put into a trust, we would have to wait a year to be able to show that that trust is making the payments for the, initial 12-month proof period that they want.
I see. So it's interesting. It's almost like you have to reformulate whatever monies are coming in and have them pay out a regular amount over a monthly amount over a
Mhm.
certain 3-year duration.
Mhm. Now, if it's annual, a lot of times we can make that work because just, like employees get a $20,000 bonus every year. We know you're
Mhm.
not getting $20,000 every single month. So we will divide that by 12 and figure out what your monthly average for that bonus is. So it would be kind of the same thing. If you have $100,000 coming to you every year or over 4 years and you get 25 a year, then we could average that out as long as everything, looks good to our mortgage brains.
Yeah. It's kosher when it comes to the underwriting process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole maze of fun that comes up. But I do like to see monthly distributions, especially when it comes from a divorcing situation. We prefer the monthly, like an alimony or a trust. If you're going to do a trust, maybe set that trust up with the distributions like on the date of separation. Whenever you have that separation agreement put together, start the trust then so that by the time you've got your 12-month separation date, or 366 days, by the time you've hit that, then maybe you can show you've got your 12-month history of receiving the trust distributions, and then you can refinance your ex-spouse off or purchase a new home or whatever you need to do.
Going one step further down this rabbit hole, because I love it. Um, let's say a person was actually distributed investments, like
Okay.
investment accounts. And although historically, because the parties were married, they didn't need the money, so they just
Mhm.
left it in the investment account. But let's say there's enough money in there, a couple $1 million, and it's returning dividends such that like the person who received those assets can actually withdraw a monthly payment. Do the same rules apply there?
We don't have to have the history of receiving that money, but there's like formulas that we have to look at to make sure it is reliable. Like right now, I have a guy who has $46,000 in an Edward Jones account, and he used to take like $2,000 or $3,000 a month out of that. But what we're looking at is having him decrease that because he's only got $46,000 left. This was supposed to be his retirement, and
Mm.
he lost a lot of
Mhm.
money when the market went down. Um,
Wow.
so instead of him taking $2,000 or $3,000 a month out of there, I'm like, okay, we got 42 grand to work with. So we're going to have him go down to $1,000 a month. And that then gives us our 3-year continuation because we only have to show $36,000, which is the 3-year continuation rule. So, in your situation, if they have a couple $1 million that they're drawing money from, we usually can use that, whether it's an asset depletion type of situation, which is a mortgage term, or if they're taking like a monthly distribution from that, we can usually use that as well.
Oh, it's so interesting.
It
I love
is.
these discussions about money and numbers, even though us lawyers did not get a master's in mathematics. I like to point that out. But it's common that at times we have to be given an extra minute to actually run the numbers.
Hmm.
Family law attorneys, we tend to be pretty good with the law, but the numbers is a different animal. I tell you
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. The law is your job.
Yeah,
So if you're
exactly.
good at numbers, that's great. But a lot of people, whether they're lawyers or not, are not really good with numbers. I think you're either math brained or you're not.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you, what is one thing you want our listeners to know about involving a CDLP in the divorce process?
I would strongly encourage you, whether you're in North Carolina or anywhere else in the country, we are all over the country. Find a CDLP and you can, type in divorce lending professional in Google and it'll bring it up and you can search in your area for somebody. And I say that because the majority of people that I work with, unless they're referred to me by somebody like Theresa who knows about me, the majority of people I work with who are going through some type of divorce mortgage process, they have been turned down by multiple other lenders before coming to me. And that's because, again, some lenders just don't know their stuff. Other lenders just don't know how detailed the mortgage process can get when you're looking at divorce mortgages. So, if you are going through a divorce and you're looking at potentially buying a house in the future, or you need to get rid of a spouse on the mortgage, or if you're the one who's going to be taken off the mortgage, call a certified divorce lending professional, because we will help you. And with us, it's never a no, it's a not yet, but here's how we can get you there. And I think that's super important, because most people I talk to have just been told no by regular lenders. And then they, go through additional heartbreak on top of their divorce that really isn't necessary.
I love that. I'm just going to reiterate it. It's not no, it's just not yet. And let's see how we can get you there.
Yes.
I love that. Well, thank you, Pam, so much for joining us here in the Legal Lounge. It's been an absolute pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.